Okay, well, first of all, thank you for this journey, taking us into this world of colors, designs, not to mention the melodies, the music. Um, what originally initiated this project to get started?
Well, she sort of left instructions in her will that she wanted her legacy done, and she had during her life had attempted to do a documentary. So I knew a documentary was kind of on the horizon. And then when COVID happened, it just seemed like, well, it's a lot easier to make a documentary in COVID because you're doing nothing but going through materials, and especially Allie with the huge archive. I thought, well, there's not doesn't have to be a lot of shooting or interviewing. It's more perfect for COVID because you're stuck in your house going through stuff. Um, so Paul Rubens introduced me to Alexis, and that was the beginning. That was sort of the connection, and Alexis just seemed like the perfect person to do this.
Now, Alexis, this is quite a mission and a project because usually in documentaries it's just a couple of years. You have decades to put together.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of material. Allie just started documenting her life. I mean, it's sort of more formally in the 1970s, but she had footage, Super 8, going back to her childhood in the 40s and 50s. If she bought a piano in 1969, she saved the classified ad. I mean, she had 6 storage units, I think, over 10,000 hours of footage. I mean, on the one hand, it was kind of a dream scenario because we always knew that if we wanted or needed something, it was probably there. We just had to find it. And it was great. Prudence and I, when we started talking about working together on the project, and I started to actually understand how big the undertaking was, we started to, think about what Allie had said. It was like, I think the unique thing was that it was like a very posthumous collaboration. Allie left a lot of instructions and had a lot of expectations for the project. Like one touchstone she mentioned was the devil and Daniel Johnston and the way that you're just sort of inside his head in that documentary. And so that was something that we were really going for. And then I think the other part of it that became a really good guiding light, because when you're consuming that much archival material, and you don't have the luxury of just going back and reviewing it multiple times or whatever, you have to make choices. Was understanding why Allie wanted someone else to make the film because she was a prolific artist herself, and she, as Prudence mentioned, had attempted to make documentaries about herself in her lifetime. And I think that was where there's a line in the film, but Allie wrote where she said, I hope I don't lose my nerve and destroy everything before I die. And I thought, she really left a lot of vulnerability and fragility that side of her that she hadn't shown a lot in her lifetime in the archives, to be discovered. And I really realized that she wanted that side of her story that she hadn't really told, because she loved to tell colorful and inspiring stories about all of the really positive and upbeat stuff. But I think she wanted people to see her internal life a bit more and understand that the degree to which she projected individuality and self-acceptance, that there was the same struggles that we all experience, and hopefully that could be part of how she inspired and made people feel seen.
As I was watching, it kind of confirms how a lot of these artists, this magnificent artists, have their troubles is the one that pushes them to uh, their artistic work. So in this case, Ollie was no exception. So can you talk a little bit of something that you were surprised to learn about during this research, about her that we no one really knew about? Maybe Prudence did, of course.
I mean, I think Prudence, I mean, what the main thing, she did an album in the 1970s, in 1974. It was her only album that she performed on, Child Star. So it was a singer-songwriter album. And she'd always told this story of moving on from being a singer-songwriter, a performer because it had been kind of a sort of small tour, demeaning experience performing in, college cafeterias. And when we got into the archive, it turned out, she'd actually been taken quite seriously by her label and been really well reviewed. But the label had chosen to market her more as the sort of conventional, like, I guess, Carole King or um, Laura Nyro or whatever. They put on the album cover an image of her with long hair and a dress doing dishes. And Allie had a really deep voice. She sang in falsetto, so that image sort of worked on the album cover. But when she'd go to her live performances, she had a deep voice. She liked to just dress in a really masculine style with suspenders, neckties, pants, things women weren't really doing on stage at that time. And she was really poorly received by some audiences. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people actually loved what she was doing. She was so ahead of her time, which I think was something that her art professionally, more than once in her life. But that was a painful sort of reality that I think sent her into a more behind the scenes role as a songwriter that she never, as far as I know, I don't think Prudence fully understood. It was something she'd really kept to herself her whole life. And that was really stunning to piece together. But it really put a lot of other contradictions about her into focus once we understood what was really going on there.
Yeah, I did not get the full story of Child Star. We sort of, Alexis and Nick dug it up, and it was quite revealing.
Prudence, while you were going through everything during COVID, was there something that you can share that it made you giggle? Like, oh, that's so her and her personality and her sayings and the way she expressed herself. Witty.
I think finding photographs of her with the young songwriters and stuff like that, just her outfits. I think the change of her getting her haircut and then in the 80s wearing it all spiky and in a way the outfits were straighter in the 80s than they were in the 90s, because I experienced her pretty much the 90s on, and so it was really fun to dig into all the 80s photos and see the style was there, the smile was there, it was Allie, but it was like a different version than the version I got, and that was it was odd, but it was also, it was like I just kept going, God, I wish I would have met her even 10 years earlier. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't necessarily regret. It was just like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah. I'm sure everyone's going to have a kick to know that she was the original reality star. I mean, people nowadays, I mean, they got nothing compared to her. They're going to have to take lessons 101 on Allee Willis.
There was a guy named Troy Duvall who I think worked on he has a real legacy of reality shows he worked on, and he tried to put together a reality show for Allie and pitch her to the networks, but nobody, she was in her 60s, and it's like nobody was interested in a 60-year-old woman, and it's like, even that woman.
No, missing out, missing out. I feel like as you're watching, even if you're not familiar with her, but for the younger generation, then once you start hearing all these music that she composed, she created, then it's like you start feeling like, oh, I do know who that is. I do know her, just from the songs. And one shocking thing that I was surprised to learn is, sadly, the pay of making the song for Friends. That was very, very sad to hear. I mean, $2,000 and 15% of royalties from Greed, really?
Yeah, that was unfortunate, but all the songs she wrote were on spec. I mean, your songs were on spec, and unless you picked up a deal with like Warner Chappell, and then they did give you an advance, but pretty much most songwriting is on spec.
That is very sad. It's very sad to hear, to see that creativity not valued and appreciated. And maybe that opens up a little talk about people, writers and lyrics to be taken care of.
Yeah, it's a big problem in the music industry now. I mean, I think now it's especially because at least then there were CDs and album sales were really robust, but to be a songwriter now and not perform your own music and not be, a performing songwriter, it's a very difficult career path. You either need to be a producer, which was also something that really eluded Allie as a woman, or you need to be performing the music where you can make a living touring. But it's something that's definitely kind of a dying art form just because the compensation isn't there. And then of course there's always been the music industry has always been notorious for, some random person who managed someone makes all the money off of this hit song instead of the people who actually did it.
Yeah, it's very sad. So in this documentary, we also get to see another legend of the screen, Paul Rubens, um, the late Paul Rubens. So what was it? How was it to get these subjects, and particularly him, who was very close to Ellie?
And Paul was my connection to the film. He was the one that introduced me to Prudence when she was looking for a filmmaker. So, although he still, I would say, was still difficult to pin down to actually interview. He was, that was just Paul. Um, but no, he really wanted to make sure that her story was in good hands, and he was just, their friendship was so fun. Like, there's so much footage, of course, that we couldn't include in the film, but they were inseparable and they had so much fun together. They would go thrift shop. They both were collectors and they would go thrift shopping or vintage shopping or whatever together. And by the end of it, they got so competitive that they'd walk into a store and just start like, I call like the velvet painting and I call the, Fiesta wear or whatever. And it was just like this intense competition, and then they would just torture each other when one of them found something that um the other person loved. But yeah, they that was a really, I think they really had a really deep influence on each other artistically.
They were very much alike. And neither one of them would like me saying that. But they were very much alike.
Now, can you also tell me about Ali real quick, the directing and then the way you put the documentary together, because it was very, very Ellie.
I mean, we went into it really wanting, and like I said, for it to be sort of inside her head and her voice, and she had such a clear aesthetic. So it was actually really nice to always have that to refer to, and that's also inspired the title. It's you're sort of getting something again that's like filtered through her lens, and I think she saw the world in such a unique way. It's like was an opportunity for people and an audience to get to look at the world through alley colored glasses, for 90 minutes and hopefully be inspired and moved by that. But yeah, she had such a strong aesthetic. I mean, I think what you mentioned about how you realize, oh, she also wrote this song and she's been a part of my life. Like, that's a recurring theme with whether it was a really close friend of hers, or someone she collaborated with, or someone that we were approaching in a different capacity for the film. People are always, or someone we shared it with at festivals or screenings, they're always blown away with how much she's actually been the soundtrack to their lives and been a part of them. And so I really wanted to play with that, and her whole aesthetic that she was putting out there in the 1980s, I think really defined a generation and that decade, even though she might not have gotten credit for it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking us on that into that world of hers. I loved it. I love the color. I got inspired to wear some color myself today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.